Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I want to talk to you guys a little bit about carbophobia, because I see a lot of this coming up again, and this tends to go in waves, and you see long periods of time to where this doesn't happen in the fitness world, and then we see an upswing of it again. We see YouTube channels promoting low carb, a lot of YouTube channels promoting ketogenic diets, and that's its own thing, but we're also seeing again this whole issue of people talking about, oh, starches are bad, you got to limit your starches, you got to limit your carbs. And Alan Aragon always calls it carbophobia. And he always says, the whole bodybuilding community is carbophobic. And he uses that term with its actual textbook meaning, meaning carb as in carbohydrates, and phobia is an irrational or unreasonable fear. And that is very much what we are dealing with here. An irrational fear, particularly, when you hear a personal trainer say, well, you got to not have too many starches. Why? The only reason anyone would be concerned about starches, at least scientifically speaking, when you go listen to the top experts who work with athletes, people who work with bodybuilders, people who do these things, who actually have advanced degrees, Alan Aragon being a perfect example, guy I listed, Eric Helms, a lot of these guys, go look at these guys. These guys all have advanced degrees. They all have postgraduate degrees in nutritional science. They all work with athletes. They all get people really, really lean. All of them think carb avoidance or being afraid of carbs is silly. The only reason to be afraid of carbs would be excessive calories. All right. And yeah, at a certain point, it's universally agreed you do have to reduce calories to lose body fat. You know what? You're going to have to at a certain point. Doesn't matter. If you're holding a large amount of body weight and a large amount of body fat, whether you're athletic or not, you will eventually, at some point in your fat loss journey, if fat loss is your goal, will most likely have to reduce calories. That's not universally true, but it's generally true. Exceptions would be people who are willing to do very, very large amounts of physical activity. But for everyone else, again, people who think an hour of cardio a day is not who I'm talking about. But for everyone else, you're going to have to reduce calories at a certain point. But as far as calories go, carbohydrates really aren't particularly fattening. Meaning, look at any society on earth. Any society on earth that follows a mostly carbohydrate diet. Is obesity a problem in these countries? Is diabetes a problem in these countries? No. This is purely a Western idea. This is a Western idea. First world Western countries have come up with this idea. And the reality is people in our countries aren't getting fat from the carbohydrates. They're getting fat from the excessive caloric intake from a plethora of sources. Refined carbohydrates, fat, everything else. People need to remember all the countries that have obesity problems usually have some of the highest fat intake in the world and the highest sugar intake in the world, right? It's not a single factor causing that. But on a calorie for calorie basis, fat is more fattening than carbohydrates are. Fat is easier to overeat than most carbs are. Most whole food carb sources are relatively satiating. You don't overeat them that easily. I mean, you can, but you got to work at it a little harder. And I'm not talking about a bunch of refined sugars. I'm talking about refined sugars. I'm talking about rice, beans, potatoes. These things are hard to overeat. You can do it. I don't want people to hear that and say, oh, well, hold my beer, bro. I'll show you I'm going to get fat on a mostly potato diet. Yeah, you can do it, but you're sure going to feel like you're going to throw up every day trying to do it. I mean, it can be done. And I don't mean a bunch of fried potatoes or potatoes where you add 1,000 calories of butter to them. I'm talking about sitting around eating potatoes with a lean protein source. Maybe some chicken or skim milk or whatever, Greek yogurt with it. You're going to struggle to gain body fat eating potatoes. In fact, that's one of the things that was studied when people have tried mono diets. And I'm not recommending mono diets, but people who tried mono diets where they eat one food usually end up losing 10, 15 pounds when they try to eat all potatoes. It's very, very difficult to overeat true starchy foods. Like starchy foods, it's difficult to overeat. You know what? It's difficult to overeat fruit to the point to where you gain body fat. I'm not saying it can't be done. It can be done, but it's difficult. And generally speaking, the cultures that eat primarily potatoes or primarily white rice or primarily fruits don't have obesity problems. Yet here we are with people being scared of it. Because, again, fad diets have told them, oh, this stuff is bad. And you know what? I think Vince Gironda started it in the bodybuilding world. And I'm not saying his methods didn't work. You know why? Because he had people eat a diet with almost no variety in it. Yeah, he got bodybuilders really, really ripped back in the 60s and 70s. Vince Gironda, the Iron Guru, you know, he had people eat steak, eggs, and water. They weren't doing modern keto diets where you got to eat cheese and all this other stuff that people come up with, these foods that you can overeat easily. No, he had them eat steak, eggs, and water with some vegetables so that they could still have a bowel movement. Yeah, you do that for a year straight like he would have guys do. You're going to lose a lot of body fat. Probably going to lose some muscle too. But the reason for that is because, not because carbs are fattening, not because starches are fattening, but because he put them into ketosis, number one, and number two, they're only eating two different foods. When you literally eat nothing but steak and eggs every single day, you get sick of it. So it doesn't matter what you eat. If I were to have you eat potatoes and bananas or chicken and brown rice, if that's all you eat 7 days a week is your main staples, you're going to get sick of it. Low variety diets make people lose body fat because there's no variety in your food. And when you have less variety in your diet, guess what happens? You eat less because you don't enjoy it as much. You don't enjoy eating as much. Therefore, you just eat less food over time. Your caloric intake goes down. Every expert who's studied obesity knows this. All right, this is well known. That's why we have obesity problems in Western countries, because we have access to limitless choices and we have access to hyper-palatable, calorically dense foods. All right, hyper-palatability, meaning foods that you can eat a large number of calories of and they're not filling and they taste really, really good. Things that have flavor enhancers, things that are really salty, things that are really sweet, things that have MSG added to them, foods that taste good, foods that you can get addicted to. You know, like potato chips, you can't eat just one. Why? Because they have salt and fat. They're delicious and they're really, really calorically dense. That's what I mean. When we have access to 100 different hyper-palatable foods with all sorts of combinations of high fat, high sugar, caloric density, all that stuff in it, that's what causes obesity. Obesity is caused by overeating. It's not even entirely caused just by fat. Fat's your biggest culprit because we don't store carbs we eat as body fat. That's a myth. We don't. We store the fat we eat. But, you know, if you go on a zero-fat diet, that's not healthy either, is it? So that's not your solution. And plenty of people get really, really lean while eating a fair amount of fat. The point is, we're sitting here blaming, people are trying to blame things like carbohydrates when they should be discussing calories. And if you were going to eat a really high-calorie diet, the diet really high in starches and minimally refined carbs is the least likely diet to put much body fat on you. It can be done. You can gain body fat overeating on that diet, but it's not going to be as much body fat as you might gain on a different diet. Yet here they are afraid of it. Why? They're afraid of starches, afraid of carbs, yet you have medical doctors and dietitians who've put people on starch-based diets and cured their type 2 diabetes and caused them to lose 50 or 100 pounds of body fat. There are medical doctors who specialize in obesity and diabetes who have their clients go on starch-based diets. And I mean true starch-based diet. You don't get to put butter on your potatoes, you eat the dry potato. Starch-based diet, getting most of your calories from starches. All of them, their diabetes goes away, their obesity goes away. Most of the top experts have athletes, bodybuilders, everyone else lose body fat on really high-carb diets. People who actually have credentials in the field, almost all of them have them do that. There's only a few outliers who do it the other way. They're a very small minority. It works. Yet people have this weird fear of carbohydrates, as if carbohydrates are the enemy. As if high carbohydrate diets in any society or at any point in history were responsible for obesity or diabetes or heart disease. That doesn't actually appear to be the case. That's a good myth to sell books. You can sell paleo books that way. It's not based in reality. It's a phobia, and it's a ridiculous phobia that people need to get over. You go look around the world, you're going to find most of the top athletes around the world, most athletic people in the world, eat starch-based diets. You go look at the leanest cultures on earth who have the lowest body fat, almost all of them eat mostly carbs. They're just not sitting around eating table sugar, and they're not eating pizza and ice cream and cake and all these high-fat, high-sugar foods. That's the only difference. They're eating actual carbs, minimally refined carbs. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.